Dialplan functions are another way to expand the power and flexibility of the Asterisk dialplan. They're similar to dialplan applications, but instead of implementing an action or event on a channel, they usually read or write a setting for a channel. Functions can also perform text manipulation, retrieve and modify caller ID settings, manipulate auto streams, gather call statistics, and more. The syntax for functions is a little unusual because it's similar to the syntax for asterisk channel variables. In fact, when using a function to retrieve a channel setting, it looks like a channel variable with an argument passed to it. This isn't far from the truth. We'll look at this in more detail and be more specific about function syntax by looking at an example. We'll use the timeout function, which was introduced in the interactive dialplan chapter. Like asterisk assigned channel variables, functions are always expressed in all caps. Contained within parentheses must be a valid argument or arguments for that particular function. Like with dialplan applications, you can view the syntax and argument structure for a given application using the command core show function name, where the name is the exact name of the specific function in uppercase. Here is the CLI output of core show function timeout. The argument digit indicates we're interested in the digit timeout, which is the maximum number of seconds asterisk will wait between DTMF digits entered by the user. The other valid arguments for the timeout function are response and absolute. When retrieving the value of a function, we wrap the function in a $sign and curly brackets just like we do with variables. However, when we use a function to set a new value, we just use the function name and arguments without the $sign and curly bracket. Because we're not reading it as if it were a variable, we're writing a new value to the channel. One of the most popular and useful functions is the caller ID function. It can be used to get or set the name, number, and various other data related to the caller ID. The all argument is shorthand for getting or setting both the name and the number at the same time. We can use this function, along with the strategies demonstrated earlier in this chapter, to route incoming calls differently based on the caller ID present in the call. In this example, we automatically hang up calls where the caller ID name is unknown. We can also use the set application and the caller ID function to manipulate our outgoing caller ID. Here we reset the caller ID name to Digium and the number to 256-428-6000 for any 3-digit or longer extension starting with an 8 before dialing out the trunk. This might be desirable if we wanted to present the main dial-in number instead of a direct extension in the outbound caller ID. Note that different technologies and regulations may limit how much control you have over your own outbound caller ID. You should research and test thoroughly before deploying a dial plan that depends on manipulating outbound caller ID. Timeout and caller ID are just two of over 100 functions available in Asterisk. There are other functions available that do not directly affect channel settings, but can be used to otherwise manipulate data or call flow in the dial plan. One example is the len function. This simple function returns the number of characters present in the argument passed to it. Here we call the len function with an argument consisting of the entire Roman alphabet. Len will return the value of 26, which is stored in a variable named length. In the next priority, the variable is passed to the say digits application, so we expect to hear
2, 6.
By itself, this might not look very interesting, but the len function can be quite useful when paired with the read and goToIf applications. We can read DTMF input from a caller, test the length of the input using the len function, and use goToIf to loop back and call read again if the caller's input wasn't long enough. The read application has an option to limit the maximum number of digits a caller inputs, but it does not natively have a way to specify the minimum number of digits to be gathered. Combining len and goToIf is one way to force a caller to enter an exact number of digits. Other dial plan functions manipulate audio, such as by changing the volume or shifting the pitch of the speaker's voice. Here's an example of how we can use the MUTEAUDIO function. This could be a practical way of enhancing the features available to a simple analog phone, by providing a way for the caller to mute themselves so the other call participants cannot hear them. To do this, we have to set some dynamic feature codes in the application maps section of the features.conf file. If you are unfamiliar with the syntax, please review the feature codes module in the intermediate dial plan chapter. Looking at the features.conf section, note that the features for both enabling and disabling the mute are set to activate on the self channel. This is because we're modifying our own channel and not the bridged channel. The mute audio function takes one argument, and that specifies which stream you're muting. In means the stream to the PBX. Out means the stream from the PBX, and all means both streams. We want to mute and unmute the audio we send to the PBX, so we use the in argument for both lines. In order for these codes to work, dynamic features must be enabled in the Dialplan. The combined result of all this configuration is that when an internal user is on an active call, pressing the 1 button invokes the mute on feature and they will be muted. Pressing the 2 button unmutes the user via the mute off feature. In this module, we introduced the concept of Dialplan functions. We learned how they extend Dialplan capabilities by making it easy to read and write channel settings. And we saw several examples of native asterisk functions. For a complete list of available functions in your version of asterisk, you can run core show functions on the asterisk CLI. In the final module of this chapter, we'll discuss Dialplan subroutines, which offer a way to group related lines of Dialplan together so they can be called as a group. As you'll see, this is a good way to keep the size of your Dialplan small even if you have hundreds or even thousands of similar extensions.